Hi, welcome to Storytime with Dave Booker. We're going to kind of hold off here a little bit. And we're live. So, everybody that hopefully will join us in a couple of minutes, we'll start the actual reading at 12 o'clock. We've got Painter's Promise, one of my newest ones, or one of my older ones. So, waiting to see if anybody else comes in. Let's see. 12:45 is when I said we'd start this. So if you're on today, welcome. Do me a favor, send a chat or something like that. Let me know who's online right now with me. So welcome to Storytime with Dave Booker. We're going to read today from Painter's Promise, one of my earlier books. You can see behind me some of the books that I have already, and I don't see that anybody's on yet. So I'm going to wait a couple minutes to see if anybody else joins in. These are the books that I have written already. And I think 12:45 is when we're actually, this is kind of like my setup time. So let's see what time it is now, 12:40. But hi, okay, hi, welcome. Glad to see somebody's on here with me. So we're going to start the actual, this is kind of like my warm up and getting ready for going here. So I appreciate you being here with me. And we've got about 5 minutes before we actually begin this. I've got my books behind me. These are the ones that I've written. Now, they're not all here. So I have a few more that I'm waiting for to come in. The ones here, let's see, these are my time travel novels, along with this one back here, which is a compendium of all of them. I have science fiction, I have history, I have religious humor, which is kind of an odd thing to put out. But looking forward to introducing these to everybody. So let me get some tea here. We keep my voice going. So that obviously didn't help much. Oh my goodness. So let's see. We'll wait until we a little bit longer until we get some more people, and then we'll begin. So I'm looking forward to this. I hope you're doing good today. I've been writing now for what, about 5 years, 6 years. Started in 2020, and this is a good selection of what I've got so far. Now I've got a channel that you can go and visit at Storytime with David over on. I'll put that on later. I'll put my a link to my blog that has a whole listing of all my books that I've put out. It has listings of books that I've read, samples. It's got my thoughts on different things, little blog posts. It's got uh, kind of reviews that I've written for other people's books, some of the authors that I've met on LinkedIn that I've enjoyed their work so much that I've actually read some of their books online on my site. So looking forward to having you check those out. And trying to see who else is coming on. Let's see. We've been doing this now. It's almost 12:45. That's our official start time. So that's when we'll begin. So now's a good time to go to the bathroom or something. This is my first time doing a reading online and doing it live. So If you do leave comments, I really would appreciate you letting me know how I'm doing. So it's time to begin. It's 12:45 my time. So welcome to Storytime with Dan Booker. We're going to do a live reading now of Painter's Promise. People can join in anytime, so I don't know how often somebody's going to. I'm going to do a quick check and make sure when I had set this up for. Let me see, I had it on Facebook that I was doing this. So let's see, my post. Yep, 12:45. So I put this on here for now. So we'll begin our reading. Okay, this is from Painter's Promise. This is a story that I have not published yet. It was to go into a magazine. The magazine chose two of my other books or stories to use. And this one was left sitting in the corner somewhere crying his little eyes out. And I said, well, let's read it here. This is Painter's Promise. Why do amateur directors always act like they're putting on a Broadway production? Listening to director Armitage drone on, John's face tightened and he ground his teeth. He had heard everything he needed to know in the first 5 seconds. John fidgeted with arms folded across his chest and his fingers tapping on the EMS patch on the right-hand sleeve of his shirt. To everyone that asked, the patch stood for Electrical, Mechanical, and Sets. In reality, it stood for Eat My Shorts, and he was tapping it incessantly as Armitage went on and on. John enjoyed doing amateur theater productions, and as the combined set designer and scenic artist, he had worked with some wonderful directors. They would tell him what they wanted. He would create a model, and upon approval, would then create the world on the stage. He'd become a master of illusion on paint. His backdrops and flats were so detailed it was as if you could walk into them. He had earned the respect of the local theaters and was a much sought-after artist. The set was a Gothic-styled mansion. The backdrop showed a gloomy Romanian countryside with gauze cutouts added for visible lightning and moonlight. He had created some special effects for this production that were beyond anything he had tried before. A long bar was strung down through an open window for when Dracula became a bat and flew away. The bat was one of his best props, even though it was his first attempt at animatronics. It was his dream to get noticed eventually by professionals. His actors and actresses were involved with productions he had worked on. They would tell other groups who would hire him for their special shows when artistic excellence was required. The right setting could make a mediocre production a great one. Finishing the backdrop, he was testing the lights through the gauze when Armitage jumped on stage, complaining that the backdrop was too good. It will take the attention away from the company. You can't upstage them. John began tapping the patch again. Sir, the backdrop will be mostly hidden by the set and only seen through the open window and when the doors are open, plus what little sky shows above the set. Arthur stroked his chin. And why'd you paint so much? It didn't show. You could have done this in panels and saved a lot of time and expense. John's brow furrowed as his temper began to rise. Sir, I charge you a set price to which you agreed to. There is no extra charge for what I have done, and when I showed you the set model, you've proved its construction. Arthur had no choice but to nod in agreement of the facts. Armitage walked up to the backdrop and then wandered around the set. Returning, he stood almost nose to nose with John, glaring at him belligerently. I still say the set is too good and you're upstaging the actors. John had had enough. Gathering up his tools, he stuffed them into a weathered satchel. Fine, I'm done here. Slinging the satchel over his shoulder, he stormed down the steps. Armitage followed, flapping his arms like a mother hen. But you're not finished yet, Armitage argued, waving his hand that encompassed the stage bereft of set pieces. As far as I'm concerned, I am. You're getting a reduced rate because your actors took up a collection to get my services. You're getting my best work for a pittance, and since you disapprove of my work, I'm leaving. He admonished and started to pull down the backdrop and folded it carefully while Armitage raved in the wings. Oh, hell, have it your way. Just get the damn job done fast. We have only a couple of weeks before opening and need a full set. As Arthur left, John performed a 90-degree bow and then turned around in that position, bestowing his posterior to Armitage. Replacing the backdrop on the cliffs, he slowly raised it back into place. From his truck, he brought in the furnishings and distributed them around the set. Then came the bric-a-brac strewn in a studied manner around. He took plenty of pictures so the set dressers would be able to put things correctly for each show. Small pieces of tape were tacked down for locations. Pulling a high wing chair to the front and center, he sat facing the completed set and promptly fell asleep. Half an hour later, he rose and approached the backdrop. Tripping on the sill of the door, he tumbled into the drop. Twisting to avoid tearing it, he fell into the drop face first, splashing in the muddy puddle he had painted. He rose with water dripping from his hair. Spinning on his heels and looking behind him, he saw an open door showing the set he had just left. From his position, the set looked like the painting. The door was set in the back of a mansion wall. He reached back and his hand pierced the painting. He followed through and stood on the stage. Hesitating for a moment, he walked back through the drop. Everything was as he had seen it the first time. Trudging further into the painting, he had created, he reached down and plucked a large flower from a muddy rut in the road. To his right were the trees he had worked long hours on. The leaves glistened with recently fallen rain. Squelching through the muddy ground, he regretted that he hadn't painted more brass. A quick knock on the painted door of a hidden cabinet slowly opened. "John?" he heard a female voice say. The door was still solidly cracked, but he could see a gleam of light from within. "John?" the same voice repeated. He felt a hand grasp his shoulder and shake him. "John?" The hand continued shaking. He brushed the hand away, but they were not to be denied. Shaking his head to clear the sleep from his head, he looked upon the stage from his seat in the wing chair. "Morning, John." The voice belonged to Marjorie. She was a stage master and had come in to check on progress. She wandered around the set admiringly. "I checked in early, but didn't see you. I guess you were here in your very comfortable chair. I admit I've taken a nap in it sometimes too." He grinned as he slowly stood and stretched. "Well, I think you're ready on this end. I'm going now. Let me know if there's anything else you need." Starting down the steps, John reversed course and ran back up for his camera. "I took quite a few snaps for the stagehands. Here's the card." Pulled out a digital drive and handed it over. She put it in her camera, preparatory to adjusting the props by scene and then taking more pictures. John walked out of the theater with his hands in his pockets into a rainy morning. Grasping the latch of his car, something was still bothering him, and he had to check. Back to the theater, leaping onto the stage, he ran to the backdrop. Marjorie found him with a lens in front of his eyes, scanning the forested area of the backdrop. Tapping him on the shoulder, she made him jump, and she dropped the lens, which he deftly caught with his right hand. "What are you looking for?" she inquired, looking into the drop herself. "A flower. I must have dropped it by the cabin." John continued his perusal. She looked at him open-mouthed. "You dropped what? Where?" His face flushed at the ridiculous way it sounded. I thought I had painted a flower here." Pointed by the rut close to the center bottom of the drop. "But I guess I painted by this cabin." Marjorie patted him on the shoulder. "You've been working too hard. Working in the day in your studio and then coming in here for most of the night on the show. Take the week off. We'll call you if we need you. Now shoot, go home and get some rest." She pushed him towards the stairs. When he left, she took a magnifying glass and peered at the area where the cabin was. On the ground was a rose laying near the door. She marveled that he would take such pains to paint a detailed rose where nobody could see it. A lonely painting. Waking well rested, a quick wash and brush, he was in his studio by one. Going over some contracts, he chose the day's work. Working quickly through 3 portraits, he got out a large canvas for a scene painting. Sitting on a stool and staring intently at the canvas, the image in his mind was overlaid by the off-white cloth. Taking a pencil without moving his eyes from the canvas, he drew the mental image. Painting was the relaxing part of the process. He got lost in his work, watching the colors blend and become whatever he had visualized. When he painted water, he could feel the coolness of the wind as it passed over the lake, making miniature waves. He could hear the rowboat creak as it rocked on the waves and the water's gurgle as it passed under. The leaves rustled in the mild zephyr breeze. The flowers opened and showed their faces to the sun. It was as detailed as a photograph, but with the added dimension of the illusion of movement. Stepping back, he admired his work. His eyes glazed as he stared into the scene. One flower wasn't right. He reached in and plucked it. He dropped it onto the floor where it splattered on his shoes and pants leg. Shook himself awake. He looked into the painting. All the flowers were there and correct. On the floor were many varied splats from his painting. One splotch near his left shoe seemed to be in the form of a flower petal. The spray had doubled the pattern onto a shoe and pant leg. The scene painting was hung by the window to finish drying. A long canvas replaced it. This was to be a full-length portrait of a debutante. She was dressed in pink satin, and the hem of her gown was gathered behind her. In her hand were a spray of baby's breath. The small pink and white flowers were offset by the green ferns that encircled them. John admired the pictures and the lovely young lady they featured. He made up his palette and began. She had said she was 22, yet retained that bloom of youth. It was finally going to be presented to society, and the painting was to be placed near where she would be photographed for the event. John lingered over the red gold of her hair, adding touches of light to make it glow. He added one curling lock flowing in front over her shoulder. Her skin was pale and without blemish. He started on her dress and actually blushed when he came to the part covering her bosom. The wide ribbon was tied in a bow that was barely visible behind her, down to the hem of the dress and her small white shoes, which were just dots peeking out. He painted shadows and emphasized her contours. Completed, he wandered off to fetch a glass of wine. Passing the radio, he switched to Don. Pleasant melody, this, he thought as he sipped his Zinfandel. Dropping into a very old and dilapidated comfortable chair, he sank into its embrace. Raising his glass to toast the beauty on the canvas, he took another sip. Gazing intently at the portrait faded from view and then came back into focus. The studio melted into gray mist while the figure in the portrait came into sharper relief. Her eyes took on an added warmth, and the lips seemed to be smiling at him. Slouching further within the cushions, he smiled back. From the hand that held the flowers, he could have sworn he saw the index finger crook, as if she were beckoning him to come to her. Happening again, he slowly rose and scuffled towards the canvas. From the radio, the strains of a waltz wafted gently into his consciousness. Laying down her bouquet, the beauty in the picture held her gloved arms outstretched to him. Without thought, he stepped up into the canvas, approached the lady fair, and took her hand. The soft music enveloped them. He gathered her into his arms. Together they danced in a close embrace. In his euphoria, his senses were heightened. He could smell the heady fragrance of the flowers and feel the warmth of her body pressed close to him. Her hair, soft and glowing, brushed his cheeks as they turned. He pulled her closer, and she leant into her head against his caress. Looking deeply into his eyes, she raised her lips to his. A sharp bell roused him from his revelry. Shaking, he looked back at the picture. The eyes held a different cast than when he remembered. The smile was warmer. In her hand lay a ribbon from her hair. He looked at his hand, and the ribbon lay in his palm, slowly melting. He shuddered and shook his head. He scratched his head and wondered. In the background, the telephone rang incessantly. John rose early the next day. Scraping and prepping, he painted a large white space on 3/4 of the wall. Nearby were materials to frame it once completed. This piece would be for himself. Starting high, a blue, orange, and gold sky of the summer morning took shape. Adding a house prominently behind the summit of a hill, he filled in supporting components. A barn, weathered and beaten, sat nearby. A horse was visible by the side of the barn. In the distance, a field overgrown and returning to its original state fades in the distance. Flush with fruit, raspberry bushes stood near the house. Farther away, apple trees drooped under their heavy load of apples. He stood back and focused on the picture. Come on now, focus. Focus on bringing it to life, he muttered. He reached out and his hand stopped at the cold stone wall. He stood further back and closed his eyes. Calming his erratically beating heart, he tried to bring the picture into sharper focus. The edges started to fade out. He rushed and jumped at the picture. He achingly dragged himself upright and massaged his forehead as a goose-egg lump made him wince. Sitting heavily in his chair, with an ice pack and whiskey soda, he consoled himself. He was roused from his musings by a knock at the door. The dead was framed in the doorway. Behind her, the bright sunlight creating an aura that surrounded her in the glowing light. A look of revulsion came over her as she looked at the cluttered studio. He ushered her inside to present her portrait. From the doorway, she admired it. She paid for it without taking her eyes off of it, without looking at John, but remained steadfastly on her image. Clearing his throat, John tried to speak casually. I was wondering if you'd care to join me for lunch. I know a fantastic place in town. She slowly turned to face him. Disgust was plain upon her features. In the mirror by the door, John caught a glimpse of himself. Lack of sleep had made his face drawn and pale. His clothes were multicolored and paint and rumpled. His bare feet stuck out of his worn shoes. He admitted to himself that the sight did not inspire confidence. He wrapped the portrait and tied it up with string. She made an angry fuss for him not carrying the portrait out for her. Hefting the picture carefully, he laid in the back of her Bentley, and she roared off down the road, flipping him off as she passed. What a pity she wasn't more like the woman in the portrait, he thought as he re-entered his studio. Finishing off a large whiskey, he shuffled through the photos he had taken of her. Studying them, he smiled. Bringing out another long canvas, he proceeded to duplicate the picture he had just released. In her face, he added even more warmth. Her body was delicate and supple, the arms inviting. This time, she was holding the hem of her dress over one arm. An elegant leg and well-shaped calf were decorously in view. Soft lighting and shadows enhanced the perfection of the face and form. Brushing off, he showered and shaved. He returned in a suit that, while old and no longer in style, fitted him to perfection. Sitting in his chair with another whiskey, he reposed and admired the beauty before him. Reclining, the whiskey warmed and relaxed him. His vision grew dim as the room faded into mist. The woman in the picture turned to him and held out her arms. He eagerly rose, stepping into the picture, into her embrace. She kissed him, her hand on the back of his neck, drawing him in closer. His hand slowly sliding up until it reached past the smooth satin to touch the warm softness of her back and neck. His lips and hers parted, and he felt her warm breath as she sighed. Easing the zipper down, he unzipped her dress, his fingers fumbling with anticipation. His hands caressed her skin as the hand glided slowly downwards. Lowering her arms, the straps glided off her shoulders. The gown drifted downward to lay at her feet. Drawing closer, her body pressed close to his in a heated embrace. Their lips met passionately. She stepped back. Her hands tore at the coat and tie. Laughing, she tossed them through the picture into the studio. Swiftly, her fingers undid the buttons of his shirt. Her hands were lost as she ran them through the hair on his bare chest. She looked up with eagerness. Her hands were quivering as she undid her brassiere. She stepped back to give him a better view, drawing the first drop downward. The crash and tinkle of the whiskey glass shattered on the floor startled him. He quickly looked back at the portrait. The Lady of Delight was but partially dressed, her brow just above the point of exposure, but ready for full disclosure. Disappointment was writ plain upon her face, longing in her eyes, her arms extended in invitation. Reaching forward, he encountered only cold paint and canvas. He cursed himself for a fool, falling in love with a figure on a canvas. He took the picture from the easel and laying it backwards against the wall. Returning to the picture he had painted on the wall, he stared at it. He wanted to do this without the need of sleeplessness or intoxication. Pulling a three-legged stool directly in front of the painting, as close as he could, he focused on the farmhouse. Focus. Relax and focus, he whispers as he squinted and concentrated until his head hurt. Opening his eyes wide, he stared until they leaped. He peered intently until his eyes were red, straining until exhaustion set in. He felt the time was at hand. His hand reached forward and met with no resistance. Standing, he wandered into the picture, his feet treading on a soft carpet of grass. Veering slightly, he headed towards the barn and horse. Neighing as he approached, he remained still. Mounting into the saddle, they rode to the house. Knocking first, he tried the door. It opened at his touch. Striding into the kitchen, he saw the warm sunlight filtering through the light curtains and making a hazy glow on everything it touched. A platter of chicken with legs rested on a checkered tablecloth. Taking one up, the smell of spices and flour reached him. It was excellent. He finished it off and grabbed another as he toured the house. The dining room table was laid out with the best china from a cabinet in the rear. In the living room was a dusty piano, chairs, and a sofa. Magazines lay strewn across the coffee table. One was open at an article on painting. Upstairs was a couple of bedrooms. Soft feather beds with thick comforters invited repose. It was an invitation he couldn't resist. He laid down and napped for an hour. When he awoke, he went downstairs and tried his hand at the piano. He was rusty, but could play a fairly decent rendition of Rhapsody in Blue. Walking outside, he untied the horse from the porch railing. Rising into the saddle, he spurted into a gallop and rode swiftly toward the painting, or around the painting. He saw the opening back to his studio. Prodding the horse to go faster, he quickly approached the opening. At the last moment, the horse screeched to a halt, sending John flying over its head. Through the canvas and crashing onto the stool, he landed in a heap on the floor. Looking back at the painting, he rubbed his bruised rear. The horse had returned to its accustomed place by the barn. Low in the painting grass, he could see marks of hoof prints from his dash around, while near the front and center were the skid marks burrowed deep in the soil from the horse's determined effort to remain in the picture. He righted the stool and sat down. Something dug into his hip. It was a chicken bone. He tasted the little meat left that it still held. It tasted like pain and was slowly dissolving in his hand. A crafty smile crept over his face. Straightening the studio and putting fresh sheets on the bed, he did a check around and made sure it was presentable to bring a lady into. When all was to his liking, he dressed in a tuxedo, picked up the portrait, and placed it backwards on the easel. He wanted to do this slowly. Anticipating the look on her face when he turned it around, he saw in his mind her almost naked body being revealed once more. Turning the portrait slowly around, what he saw wasn't what he expected. She was dressed, standing before the table, holding the bouquet in her hands. Her face turned away from him. Forced himself to be calm, to focus, and to ease into the picture. He walked in with no problem and touched her arm. There was no response. He kissed her shoulder and tried to embrace her. She might have been carved of marble. He took her firmly by the shoulders and spun her around. Her eyes met his, and he saw the hurt in them as tears flowed down. Holding her close, he pressed an apologetic kiss on her lips. Her arms wrapped around him, enfolding him. Drawing back, she unzipped the dress and shrugged out of it. John leapt out of the portrait and held out his arms. She ran to him and launched herself into his arms. Suddenly, John was awash in paint. It splattered over his tuxedo, on the floor, the walls, and his table. He hastily took out brush and paint and began to again, then threw them across the room. With mop and bucket, he cleaned the paint up. He went to the theater to see the production, hoping to distract himself. It was a good show. The critics agreed that it was made better by the detailed set and backdrop. The special effects were first rate, and the sight of Dracula leaping off set a puff of smoke and a bat slowly flying down to the open window rated an ovation. Marjorie peeped from a side curtain, spotted John in the audience, and went to speak to the director. The powers of persuasion must have been great, because he agreed to bring John on stage to take a bow for a set. He enjoyed the sensation of being on stage and receiving a standing ovation for his work. It meant more to him than any pay he had ever received. Arriving home, he was glowing with warmth. He wanted to share his feelings with the painted lady. Swinging open the door, he fairly danced up to the canvas. His eyes met an almost bare painting. Table, a spray of flowers resting on it, and a crumpled dress resting on the floor were all that remained. He reached in and brought the dress to him. Merging, it melted into a pale pink puddle on the floor. Collapsing into a corner, John wept. Longing swept through him, stronger than any he had ever known. He rose decisively, took up the palette and brushes. With bounding strides, he went to the canvas to begin again. He took more time over this one. He was only going to paint her once more. His heart couldn't stand another failure. Painting a house in the background, inside of it, just the table made a place where he could stay with her. If he couldn't bring her back out into his world, he would live in hers. Working from the ground up ensured face was the last thing he painted. He painted her body in all its glory, then clothed it in a gossamer gown. Her hair was down and hung over her shoulders, her lips painted to be kissed. Her face radiated beauty and warmth. Never had he worked so carefully. Her eyes held a gleam of love. The blue was radiant and shone with a light from within. Closing the studio, he paused as a storm sounded in the distance. Rain was streaming down the windows, and from a leak in the roof, a small drop splattered onto the floor. Kicking the waste basket under the falling drops, his attention returned to his fair inamorata. In the picture, she was standing, looking at him steadily. Her hand reached down and raised the gown so that her legs were in view. Her finger crooked, come hither fashion, and she smiled seductively. Well, he needed no further encouragement. Rushing up into the picture, then into her arms, she was his now, and he was hers. Pouring all his love and passion into his kiss, they lingered, lost to all other sensations. Outside the studio, the rain and thunder increased. The drip became a pour, and the crack in the ceiling slowly spread towards the canvas. In the picture, two lovers embraced, oblivious of everything but their desire. With a crash, the ceiling opened. Water poured down over the picture. The canvas was divested of paint. On the floor were two puddles of paint and water. One still retained a slight resemblance of a female form, the other more masculine. The puddles joined momentarily. Then a rush of wind from the open ceiling mingled with the two puddles and diluted them. The sun broke through the clouds and shafts of light, warmth shone through and flooded the studio. The water evaporated in two rising clouds of steam that briefly touched, then faded. So that's where we're going to stop. That's the story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll be back. Now, let me reach back and see which one. Here it is. This is Sheriff in a Small Town 2. Now, I've done a full reading of Sheriff in a Small Town. This is going to be the next reading that we're going to do. So hopefully you'll be here for that. I look forward to it. I'm going to start doing these readings at night. Probably start about 6 o'clock at night. This will be the first book that we do as I work on my next selection, which will be another reading, another book of Soul Man called what are they calling this one? Tony Tooncombs. He's going to be the next villain for it. So I look forward to that, reading that to you. Again, we'll be doing this book in a couple of days, and I look forward to reading it to you. I will put out a notice as to what time and date that we're going to do it, figuring about 4 days. So that's it for today. I'm going to sign off. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you listening in. Hope you enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you again on our next reading. So from Storytime with Dan Booker, thank you very much for joining me. And be good to yourself. Good night.